Hello friends, and welcome back to another video, and a special big hello if you are new. Today I thought I would share with you the books that I read in August. I read 3 physical books and 3 ebooks. I also read a short story on ebook, so if you count that, then I read 4 books on ebook, but I'm going to talk about it regardless. So anyway, let's get into the video. As always, I'm going to start with my physical books read. So the first physical book that I read was Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This tells the story of Alex, who is the son of the President of the United States, and Henry, who is a prince over in England. The two of them do not like each other very well, and they actually have a very public spectacle or incident. Basically their family PR teams set them down and are like, hey, you two have got to pretend to be friends, it's causing like public relation problems, like we've got to sort this out. So they do that, and they actually become like genuine friends and end up falling in love. I really liked this book. I genuinely thought that it was really precious, like their love story and the way that they fall in love was just really sweet. I really enjoyed the pacing of the book too. It wasn't something that was like insta love. You really get to see them like slowly start to enjoy each other's company and see things in the other one's perspective and have a better understanding for who they are, and then slowly begin to fall in love. It was really, really sweet. I feel like this book could have been really hard to have executed well. Just like the premise is very neat, but it could have, there's so many different ways it could have been thought out. And I really liked the way that it was done. I really, really did enjoy this one. When I first picked this up, I didn't think that I would necessarily end up reading more of Casey McQuiston. Like I was just very interested in this story, and that was kind of it. But I really did enjoy it a lot. So I would like to read more by her, so if you have any recommendations of where I should go next, please let me know. The next physical book that I read was Just for the Summer by Jimenez. This tells the story of Emma and Justin. They both consider themselves cursed because every time they break up with someone, that person goes on to find like their soulmate and get married and have their happily ever after. So they decide to date each other to kind of cancel out that curse when they break up. There's also a lot more depth in this story. So Justin is temporarily taking custody of his 3 younger siblings, and Emma has, I'm trying to think of a nice way to put it. She basically just has this horribly toxic, neurotic mother who pops in and out of her life and is popping in her life and just kind of causing a lot of issues and drama. And all of that obviously comes into play because even though it was supposed to be like this sort of fake dating type of issue, they actually begin to really like each other. I really did like this one a lot. I really enjoy Jimenez's writing, and I definitely want to read more by her. I have read Yours Truly too, and I do think that I like it a little bit better. There were certain things about this book, especially toward the end, so I don't want to talk about them too much, that felt a little unrealistic to me. I just feel like some of the issues that the characters were facing just wouldn't have been resolved that quickly for them to have like gotten together. I don't know. I know that sounds so like unnecessarily critical, but I did really enjoy it. It was really good and just heartwarming. I really enjoy her writing and the banter between the characters. And another thing that I really liked about this book was the friendships that the characters had. So they were able to find like support within each other, but they also had a really good support system around them that kind of helped them get through the issues that they were facing. I really liked that. I also really like, so these are like interconnected standalones, and I like that the interconnection is very loosely based. They're not like siblings or anything. Justin appears so briefly in Yours Truly, so I really like that it's not too overdone with like the interconnectedness of the story. And the last physical book that I read was 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. This tells the story of Eva and Shane. They are both writers. Eva writes like fantasy smut basically, And Shane is like this recluse literary writer. He kind of drops this great story and then just disappears from the scene for a while. So they actually meet up at a Black literary event, and it becomes known that Shane and Eva actually dated when they were children, or not children, they were teenagers. And they spent like this crazy week in love, hence 7 days, and now it's like 7 days that they're spending together in the future. Eva's very weary because Shane broke her heart and doesn't know if she can like trust him to not just disappear from her life like he did before when they were younger. I really liked this book. It was a lot darker and covered a lot more heavy subject matter than I necessarily anticipated, so definitely do keep that in mind. I really loved the way that it was written with the flashbacks in the present day. I really liked Eva and Shane as characters, especially Eva. She was just a very, very cool character. I don't know, it was very, very good. And I know that Tia Williams has another book out. It's A Love Song for Ricky Wilde, and that book sounds really good too. So I definitely think she's going to become an author that I read pretty frequently now. Moving on to ebooks, the first ebook that I read was A Drinker of Ink, or I don't think there's an A there, I think it's Drinker of Ink by Shannon Castleton. This tells the story of a young girl who, it's set during the 90s, and she's in college in California and her family is in New York. She is very attached to her family and she's very anxious with being away from them. Her mom had been sick in the past, and she's very fearful that her mom is becoming sick again, and she feels that her family is distancing themselves from her. And she is falling in love with a graduate student who is kind of helping teach one of her poetry classes. It is all told within journals, and it was the sweetest coming of age story. I really loved it. I identified to the main character so much. I felt how she felt deep in my soul, and I think getting to kind of read her journal or her diary just gave you such a more intimate view into her. The love story was really sweet, and it wasn't a like creepy age dynamic or anything like that. She's like 20 or 21 and he was like 25, so it's not like this 19-year-old's falling in love with this like 40-year-old professor or anything like that. This was a debut novel too, and I just will read anything that Shannon Castleton puts out. It was the only book this month that I gave 5 stars, and I definitely think it'll make it into my top 5 books at the end of the year. It was so good, and it's one of those books that are really hard to describe why it was so special. It's just one of those books that I think it's either really for you, like you really feel it deep in your heart and soul, or it's not, and it was just absolutely 100% for me. The next book that I read was My Lady Jane by Cynthia Hand, Brodi, Ashton, and Jodi Meadows. I had to write their names down because I could not remember all of them for the life of me. This is a reimagined story of Lady Jane Grey. So it's basically, I think she was Queen of England for 9 days. Maybe it was 6, but I think it was 9, and then she was executed. She was only 16. It's a really sad story, and we all, I don't know if you're into like history stuff as much as I am, but we've all kind of seen the painting. I'll pop it up, but it is like so sad. So when I saw that My Lady Jane was coming out on Prime, I was interested in the show and actually didn't know it was a book. And I was scrolling on Kindle Unlimited and it popped up and I was like, oh, I didn't know it was a book. And I didn't know at the time that it was about Lady Jane Grey either. So I was like, oh, this is so good. And the idea that she could have a different story told for her and a happy ending was just right up my alley. It is very fantasy based. It's very whimsical and quirky. I don't think that it is necessarily for everyone, but I really enjoyed it. The love story was very sweet. I enjoyed all of the characters. I loved the magic in the story. It just was such a fun ride, and I highly recommend it. I've not seen the Prime series yet, but I'm looking forward to, even though I've heard it's being canceled, so I hope it at least wraps up the story enough, but I will keep you updated on my journey with that. But it was so good. Next, I read the ebook that I mentioned earlier. It is The Bookstore Sisters by Alice Hoffman. I really enjoy Alice Hoffman's writing, and I love the like magical realism that she puts into her stories. This book fell a little short for me. I'm kind of glad that it was just a short story, but I think maybe if it had been a novel, we could have hashed things out a little bit more and it might have been better. It basically tells the story of two sisters. Their parents have both died, and they kind of grew up in a bookstore. Their father owned a bookstore, and they were quite poor because their dad kind of used it as more of a library. Just take it, and if you want to bring it back, you can, rather than a bookstore. So they didn't really make a ton of money. One of the sisters runs off to New York, gets married, it doesn't work out, tries to live this certain life. The other sister stays at home and marries her husband, unfortunately passes away, and she's trying to run this bookstore. She has a preteen daughter, I believe, and the preteen daughter writes to the sister and is like, hey, she's hurt herself, like she broke her leg or something like that, and you need to come home and help out. So she does. It felt a lot like the sisters in Practical Magic and kind of their stories to me. And I don't know, that really is pretty much the gist of the story. I know that there are 2 more, so I will probably read them and see if it improves, but I don't know, it really fell short for me. I think I gave it 3 stars, and I think that might have been honestly a little generous. Now that I'm kind of reflecting upon it, the characters felt just very flat, and I don't know. Again, once we kind of get into the other book in the series, it might be better, but I don't know. I just have very mixed opinions on it, but it has very good ratings, so take what I say with a grain of salt, I guess. The next and final book that I read in August was The Duke's Diary by Ashton Newbold. Last month, I mentioned that I read The Earl Next Door by Ashton Newbold, and I was hoping that she would become a really good, just like Regency romance writer and a good, like, kind of palate cleanser book for me. And I think that she has. Like, I think that I have finally found the Regency, like, romance writer that I want, that feels realistic and cute and fun and not overdone. But anyway, this tells the story of a young girl. Her father wants to marry her off to this horrible man that she doesn't want to marry. He is just gross and rude and so much older than her, but he can pay off her father's debts. So her brother and his best friend his name is Timothy, decide to kind of stage a fake kidnapping and whisk Lenora off to the up north part of England. I think they're in like Northumberland, and kind of hide her away until she comes of age and can go out in London society and then choose a husband for herself. While she's there, she discovers Timothy's diary. She's always had a little bit of a connection with Timothy and had a little bit of crush on him, but didn't really think much into it because he was a lot older than her, and he was her brother's best friend. But she discovers Timothy's diary and finds out that he's actually always kind of had feelings for her and wanted to marry her. But there's like a little secret in there that he has to resolve before he could potentially even consider marrying her, and you don't know what that is. You spend half the book trying to figure that out. It was really sweet and fun. Like I said, it felt really realistic in terms of a Regency novel. I don't like when in Regency novels when they're like sneaking off without chaperones and stuff. That's just not realistic to the time. So I really like how, again, it is very realistic. I loved the relationship. I loved that they both really liked each other, but they couldn't like interpret it. Like there's a scene when Timothy is trying to teach Lenore to dance, and he like wipes his hands on his trousers because he's like, oh, I touched her hands, you know? And she's like, oh my gosh, she's so disgusted by me. He has to wipe his hands after he touches me. And I don't know, it was just really sweet and really fun, and I enjoyed it. I love Ashton Newbold's writing, and there's another one in the series coming out in September, and I just can't wait to read it. Thank you guys so much for being here and listening to me babble on about the books that I read in August. Please let me know if you have any recommendations or anything like that below, and I guess I will see you in my next video. Bye!